Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lore You Know. I'm joined today by Sarah Stewart, my co host for the Scarred Lands, and we're talking about the Perforated Plains and more, kind of that area
And more,
around it. Yeah. But before we
finally.
dive in, I have some other Scarred Lands news to share. This last Wednesday, Yugman's Guide to Ghelspad, the collected version released on Drive Through RPG. Please head over and pick that up. It is an amazing collection of new options, both for the DM and for your players. There's a link for you to follow. It has new races, new classes, well, really new subclasses, new backgrounds, new spells. Talks about doesn't really go into like new areas. That's more of the Vigil Watch series, which also should be getting a collected version here. I think next month is the plan for
I think it's
that.
next month, yeah.
So yeah, head over and check that out. Also, because I always forget, well, here's a link to Found Familiar Coffee, my affiliate link.
Yes.
If you put in the WH Pubs code at checkout, you get 10% off. So if you like coffee as much as I do, which may not actually be a possibility, who knows? I actually had coffee worked into my marriage vows, just to throw that out there. I love my wife more than coffee, was my point. I think she got it.
My brother managed to work in Arkham Horror into his marriage vows, so.
That's amazing.
No, I'm just from a family of nerds.
Right. I appreciate that. That's yeah. I'm
Yeah,
a cosmic horror fan, so that's
yeah.
right there in my heart.
Family, yeah.
So Sarah, we're talking about the perforated plains, and I did have this thought that I wanted to throw out there because, again, much like most things before the Divine War, this area was kind of a verdant land of, rivers and trees and excuse me, farmland. And, it
Farm.
was the kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
this amazing place to live,
Yeah.
and it got fucked up.
Shit upon.
And so I feel like there's a sage out there, or maybe not even a sage, just a scribe that gets paid to sit down and be like, okay, so they wrote on the map, they were like fucked up wasteland, but that's a terrible name. So what alliteration can I do today to come up with a name for this? And they sit down and they're like, okay, we already have the morning marshes, so can't use that. And they came up with the
I
perforated plains.
technically Perforated Plains were named before the Morning Marshes.
That is fair, yeah. But you know that there's some scribe that's their whole job is to come up with an
Yep.
alliteration to call
Yep.
these different
For
places.
the different places.
So
The
Sarah, why
Perforated
are
Plains.
the perforated plains perforated?
Oh, I'm gonna get to that. Yeah, I like starting with history first. So I want to start with history first because that's
Yeah, because they didn't
because this
start
is about
perforated.
because this is about RMR. This is about the Ledean Empire. This thing that we keep kind of mentioning a lot. Like
Yeah,
the
well, because it was everywhere.
it was everywhere. The Ledean Empire um was the first or second human empire of Ghelspad. I'm still not 100% sure what the dominant race of the Empire of the Flame was. It might have been humans.
I feel like it was
Someone told
human.
me. I
Yeah,
feel like it was human. But the Ledean Empire and the Empire of the Flame was like fell and bad shit happened, and it didn't. I don't think the Empire of the Flame encompassed all of Ghelspad. The Ledean Empire came as close to any empire of encompassing the entire continent. And basically it covered pretty much everywhere except this region and Albadia, but it covered like everything else pretty much, or at least in so much as the Roman Empire claimed, we claimed
right. We've taken over
Portugal,
the
but they kind of,
world.
or whatever. I'm guessing, I don't know. So they claimed everything, and they had roads in Texas and whatnot. But it all started in the Perforated Plains. It all started in this place called Arimar, which was the capital city of the Ledean Empire forever, and the province that encompassed the Perforated Plains. So basically everything south of the Titanstone Mountains and Albadia and that region, and the terrain definitely different back then, was the Ledean Empire. And the OC calendar, or they call it the Old Calendar, is the comes from this empire. OC1 is when the Ledean Empire was founded by the Turum dynasty. 3 generals basically got their shit together and said, let's protect these random villages and farms and communities and build an army to defend them from the creatures of the wilderness. They didn't even, they may have called them Titan Spawn back then, but I don't think they did. They were just the monsters that fuck with people. They knew about the Titans, but I don't even think there was a differentiation at that point on this level. I mean, they could have been, but anyway, they claimed they kind of set shop here, built a city, and then over the course of the next 300 years, claimed the nearby regions of what eventually becomes Darrakeen, and eventually becomes the Broadreach / Hornsop Forest, called the Dara and Veridan provinces. And I'm not going to go into detail beyond that, but there's we go through 11 dynasties of the Ledean Empire over the course of the next 2,400 years.
They were around for a while.
They were around for a long time.
Yeah.
And each dynasty, dynasties lasted various times. The big of interest, while mostly humans, there was one dynasty where they had orc blood. And they were overthrown by a bunch of people who hated orcs. And who became the next dynasty, and then when orcs aren't citizens anymore, because emperors eventually become assholes. So there you go. And as each dynasty took over, there was times of expansion, and eventually they just built and built and built and collected provinces as they went. And they had, oh my goodness, one. I'm not even gonna count. I should have counted them ahead of time, but Mount Calastia, Camian, where Hadrat is, various islands around the continent, Vesh, New Veneer, and Galita's Grove, and as we talked about when we did the Shelzar history, that was the Thathiskite province, and basically had everything except the Kurdan Desert down. They didn't have they called that the Great Wilds, and they did consider it part of the Empire, but they were like, it's the Great Wilds, no one goes there because it's gross. And that was the Goblin Lands, which is now Chardonnay and the swamps of Khet. But basically everything else was that, except the Elbadia, which was like, you don't get us. Fuck off, we're the barbarians of the north. And grew, and then but bad things happened amongst the Zathiskian folks, the Zathiskite. One of the Zathiskites took over the empire for a while. They moved the capital to Els for a while, and then they're overthrown again. And there's a lot of back and forth between all these various dynasties, almost all ending violently. Till finally, group of various provinces started fighting back and declaring independence over the course of we were part of the empire for a couple thousand years. Now we're like, you guys are screwing it up, and started breaking off toward that tail end, until finally in the Argent dynasty, which was 2130 to 2275, they reigned tyrannically and had really high taxes, and rebellion basically really fomented in the outlying provinces, going, yeah, no, which feels a lot like America, British Empire, no more, we're not paying for your tea anymore, and then in what eventually becomes Calastia and the islands, and then all those places were like, screw off, we're going to do our thing, and broke off and rebelled and became independent, and eventually became the countries we know of today in Skarn. Until finally, in the Thel dynasty, most by the end of that dynasty, everybody except the original Arimar had been like, we're out, and rebelled and broke off. And so there was only the final province left that started the whole thing nearly 2,500 years ago. And then they were, well, and then interesting things happened at that point. So it's the, in a nutshell, 2,000 years, how that happened. So why is it called the Perforated Plains? At the end of the Thale dynasty, the there was these guys. I talked about it last episode. These Albadians, they really didn't like male sorcerers. They're like, nope, out, or would kill you or whatever. And so a bunch of these male sorcerers left Albadia and went to Armor. Like, hi, can you take us in? We don't want to be homeless because it sucks out here. And I was like, sure, yeah, you can live here. And they came into the city. And there was like, I don't know how many there were, but I don't think they specify how many there were, but there were these sorcerers. And they came in the city and they just sort of hung out there for a few months. And then, I'm trying to find the exact history here. These guys from Darakeen, which had now declared itself a country and was like, we're no longer part of the Empire, came and attacked the city. Like, haha, we're badass. We're going to take the last of the Empire away from you. And they attacked the city. And so these sorcerers came out and they did their thing. And they're like, fireball, cone of gold, we summon elementals. And they just beat the shit out of the army. And the city was like, thank you, you're amazing. Could you like govern us? And they were like, you're an emperor. Sure, we can govern you, I guess. And they just sort of took over. And, or at least that's the way the story goes. You know, whether they were like, yes, happily govern you, or, well, we are nefariously governing you.
I mean, I guess I will.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna try to get all that in there. So they took over and became the new kings of the empire, and they were pretty much considered the last rulers of the Empire of Lead. Now, whether it is still the part of the Empire of Lead or not, at that point, they declared it the Empire of the Wheel, because there wasn't an emperor anymore. There was just these kind of ruling cabal faction. They called it the Empire of the Wheel because the city itself, way back in the day, they built roads, kind of like the Roman Empire, and roads that spread throughout the whole continent. And the literally was meant to be the center was all roads lead to Armar.
Right.
And the roads branched out like spokes on a wheel, and so that's where the name came from. Even though the roads weren't really maintained at this point, certainly beyond the borders of the province, but they still called it that, and then they ruled it for a chunk. And then, as I talked about before, toward the end of that, these barbarians from Albadia came and went, nope, you don't get to rule that anymore. And there was this big battle, and they threw magic at each other. And they used a lot of, what I would call the equivalent of like meteor swarm was apparently a very popular spell. And this battle wasn't just over the city. This was like throughout, running battle throughout the whole province. And they threw a lot of rocks, and I think the combination of meteor swarm and what's that, storm of vengeance. Anyway, think 9th level divine and arcane spells.
Massive destruction.
Massive destruction, which caused all these pockets, these holes, to appear throughout the region. Thus named the Perforated Plains. Apparently the ground was soft or something. Anyway, all this magic running around pockmarked the land with hail and they just said hail and rocks, and I'm thinking, this is magic, so it's to me that's storm of vengeance and meteor swarm.
Yeah.
Something like that. Something really cataclysmic and big, and this battle goes on for years until when they threw in the magic, and suddenly the magic went poof and changed. It did other shit, and they're like, what just happened? Because Mesos died, and all the magic got all oof and messed up, and they went, what's going on? Let's retreat and regroup and find out what just happened to our magic. And the Albadians went back to Albadia, and the Sorcerer Kings went back in their city behind their walls and licked their wounds. And then the Divine War happened. Sorcerer Kings tried to be neutral, which was maybe not the smartest move. And they're like, we don't want, please don't make us fight. We don't, not picking a side and all that. But then a group in their thing, in the Sorcerer Kings, in that this like cabal cult within the city, were Titan worshippers, rampant, vehement, like passionate Titan worshippers, and they're like, no, we have to follow the Titans. They basically overthrew the ruler, and went, this is ours, and that pissed off several of the gods who showed up and were like, oh, and we talked about all this a little bit, I think, and there was a big fight. Three of the gods, first gods forces and showed up, and they sieged the city, and they're like, oh, you're following the Titans, you're not on our side, we're going to beat you up. And big huge battle, and it was Vangal, Madriel, and Tunnel showed up, and they were like, we're done. And probably Vangal cast this godly magic and sunk the city into the ground. Just, you're done. And just destroyed the city by just sinking it into the ground, which was apparently soft from all of the fireballs and whatnot happened before. But Madriel was like, there's a couple of people that are good, I'm going to save them. And she made this little pillar of like 200 feet wide in the middle of the sinkingness that stayed. And so most of the city foomp into the ground with this little pillar that sticks out, which saved a handful of people. And she showed her mercy to, I guess somebody prayed smartly to the right goddess, and we're like, okay, fine, I will hold his hand, but not let all of it sink in the ground. Luckily, Madriel was there. And that became this weird, funky pillar, and they call it now the Pillar of Non in the lands of Non. And Non, N-O-N, in Old Ledean, and kind of in English, means none or nothing, as it is now known as, because this is the land of nothing, where once there stood the greatest empire in Ghelspad, is now this forsaken land, and of this wasteland with this weird sinkhole that's like several miles wide, with this weird pillar in the middle of it that's a few hundred feet wide, with this little ruins of once was a fair city in the middle.
Yeah, you think that like she could have saved something on the edge rather than the middle, because it's not a good vacation
How
spot.
do you get out?
You can't, right?
Oh, and how do you get out? And they did. Those who were able to eventually flee somehow, I don't know, maybe Madriel teleported them or something, I don't know. Eventually they did abandon the city completely, because it's not like you could live there. There was no way to get resources in. What are you going to do? So the city was abandoned for the most part, and and that's the way it is today. It's just these weird ruins of a city. No one lives there who's alive on top of this pillar. And it's just really funky. Then, in a few decades later, in the middle of the Divine War, the big fight with Gaurak the Glutton happened. And Denev pulled out all of his teeth and hucked them all over the place, including, and we talked about this before, making Fangs fall, and the Devouring Reef, and Spires of Gaurak, which we'll talk about in a bit. And a bunch of those teeth fell across the Perforated Plains as well, which I think is what really cemented that title. Is it started with this war, but then it really was a whole bunch of teeth fell too, which added more pockmarks and weird terrain. But I think that the difference is the teeth generally create mountains, not holes, which is why there's just discrepancy here. The old lore, in some places say that it's called the Perforated Plains because the teeth fell, and in other places say it's called the Perforated Plains because of the Sorcerer War. And in the new lore, it just mentions the Sorcerer War, I think. So, and I think the new lore was just cleaning that up, because teeth don't really make craters so much as mountains, I mean, not to say they wouldn't make craters, because and meteor certainly would, but the conceit in this, at least, is that the mountains were the teeth, not so much the holes. And certainly the teeth didn't make the sinkhole of Non. So there you go there. So why is it called the Perforated Plains? Lots of crazy shit happened, basically.
Yeah. I do have the hardest time because, especially where it is, it like almost crosses the continent, and there's like two little areas on either side. But like, if you wanted to fold and tear off a piece of the continent, that would be a good spot to do it. So it's perforated, just like paper.
That was terrible.
I know, right? I'm just like, why did they use perforation? That is such a weird choice. But when you gotta find a P number for, why didn't they call it the pockmarked plains?
Where the map cuts when it's 2-pager, it is like right through the scrub woods. And so it's like right on the edge of the Perforated Plains. So yeah, because the scrub woods doesn't show up on some of the maps because that's literally where the crease is. Yeah. They didn't kerning, so it plan for where the map is getting. Anyway, but there's the good map came with the Ghelspad Gazetteer, which is like the Foldo. Right. Yeah. Colored map. I've got it somewhere, although it's kind of a little bit fucked up. But it's way more detailed than this. Yeah. So that's that. A little bit about the Pillar of Non. I love this location in terms of, not that we don't have enough creepy ruins to explore in the Scarlands.
Right. True.
And today I'm going to cover about everywhere. 6. This one is particularly neat because it has a couple of magic items in the relics and rituals, and various places are described in this, including the bells of Non, which are one of these Titan cult worshippers became like basically died there and became a ghost, and he was so mad, so upset, that he has haunted the city in the 200-ish years ever since. And his job before he died, in addition to being a Titan worshipping cultist, was bell ringer at this tower. And the tower, for the most part, remained. And the tower is full of all of these bronze bells. There's like a bunch of them, like, I think bell ringers kind of music. And 7 of these bells survived the war, survived the cataclysm. And his anger and evil magic or something basically cursed these 7 bells. And now he just periodically fucks with people and rings them and makes horrible things happen when he does. And luckily, the bell, and this is back in the 3X rule set, the bells, their magic, many of them can only happen like once a day or once a week, or in some cases once a month, which is a good thing, because these bells do horrible things as progressively more powerful. The less frequent you can ring them, like the 5 times a day bell just causes panic and fear. The once a month bell creates a circle of death to anyone who can hear it, which is, I think, like finger of death.
That's amazing.
And there's a whole bunch of effects in the middle, like you go mad, or you get mommy rot, or
right. When is the brown note for you South Park watchers? The brown note, just everyone shits themselves when that one goes off.
Well, that's the first one. That's the cause panic. I think. It's the weenie one. But yeah, and one of them causes thunder and unholy. What do they call it? Damage. What do they call it? Necrotic and thunder damage, or sonic damage. So all sorts of things, and this guy just dong 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 dong. So if you ever go to Non and you're like, we're gonna loot the ruins and find treasure and whatnot, and you get there and then they're like, oh crap, we're all gonna die because we can hear the music, and even sticking wax in your ears is not gonna help, because it's not just you can hear it, but
are those church bells? I love church bells.
Yeah, pretty much.
Damn.
Yeah. And then there's one other thing that came out of Relics and Rituals that I thought was cool. This was Relics and Rituals 2, the Codex of Non, which is a book that another survivor of Arimar wrote. It was discovered in 112 AV in Albania, handed over to the Veshan Vigils, who did a bunch of research on it before it was stolen, because there's a quest. Find the Codex of Dawn for us, guys. And discovered all sorts of crazy writing in this 222-page volume of "You are all cursed, and I am mad." And you open the book and you have to make a will save, because otherwise you get like bane for life. I'm not kidding.
I feel like really it's the Scarredlands version of the Book of Vile Darkness. Slash the Necronomicon slash what all of those books. It's that fill in.
It's not fiendish. It's just a crazy wizard wrote it, but it definitely has that vibe. It's a spell book. It's a history book. It's cursed, and it's got a treasure map in it. So, it talks about the silver labyrinth beneath the pillar. Because this guy wrote it exploring the Pillar of None. Apparently, he had some way to get through the bells or something. And so really wild, book. I wouldn't put it up there with the Phoenix Codex. I mean, I would put it up there in terms of the, we call it the lore around it, but it's not up there in terms of what it does. But it's certainly like famous, horrible book,
right? And
one of a kind, and includes one of my favorite spells. Mormo's serpent hands are in this one.
Nice.
That got spread around. The Veshan Vigil learned Mormo's serpent hands through the Codex of None. So that Relics and Rituals goes into great detail about what each section of pages covers, but just crazy fun in terms of this book. But yeah, I definitely up there in terms of nefariousness of that. And, boost your will save before you open the book, guys. You're gonna, or wisdom save.
Have that paladin stand next to you. Everything you can do.
Everything you can do before you open that book, because you're gonna go, a unremovable Bane curse. So that would suck, because you'd be able to minus whatever it all. I don't know how Bane works in 5th edition.
I think it's D4. In 5th edition, I think it's a D4 off your rolls.
Yeah, this was -6 to everything forever. Basically level drain. So pretty bad. So that's the bulk of the highlights, I should say, of Non. Going back to the rest of the Perforated Plains. So why is it called? Oh, here's a little factoid. It used to be called the Plains of Lead. Back in the day, because this was the Ledean Empire, and there were beautiful plains before they were ruined. But now there's this new place called the Plains of Lead, which is here. What's up with that? So back in the early days of the Empire, this was called the Orc Marches, because this is where all the orcs lived, or the orcs and Prout were all up here, and they still are. When it became part of the Ledean Empire, because I said everything was part of the Ledean Empire, they changed the name to the Eastern Plains of Lead. Plains of Lead, Eastern Plains of Lead. When the Plains of Lead were no longer the Plains of Lead and became the Perforated Plains, the Eastern Plains of Lead became the Plains of Lead. So, that's simple. And there you go.
The lore you know.
The lore you know. So when you hear why is the Plains of Lead? Why did it get moved? That's why I got moved, and I like that, and I'm sure it was sort of someone fucked up with the writing, but then they came up with this cool, lampshady way of explaining why it got changed. There's that. What else? Anything else with the insanity that is the Perforated Plains that we should cover? So I am totally glossing over a ton of information. Moving on, then. Or if you don't think I missed anything important, Jeremy.
I'm not seeing anything. Just going through what I've got here.
Yeah, I've got a ton of flora and fauna, but I don't think you guys care. Maybe you do. I don't know. You can look it up. There's a couple of interesting geographic locations. I guess I can mention those. Um, leading war colleges came from here, or the that we talked about in Derakeen, where they inherited, eventually moved there. And there's ruins of one of those war colleges on a high mesa, where a fatling priest now lives, because Gaurak's influence is here because of all the falling teeth. One of those felled teeth created Fang Mount, which is second after the lands of Non in terms of weird places in the plains. Used to be a flat top mesa, now there's a big tooth jutting out of it. It's interesting that this is where I got the whole Gaurak's teeth were like rocks, because they created, basically, they're not like bone or dentin, they're more like rocks.
Yeah, and they even say in a certain spot, in one of the entries of the lore, that the stones of Gaurak's teeth essentially came crashing down, and so like it's definitely likened to stone as opposed to bone.
Like
He didn't have
yeah.
he didn't have these. Like, he could bite through anything. He could eat whatever he wanted to.
Control.
Yeah,
There's a place called the Sunken Lake.
Mm-hmm.
When the land around Lake Marith was shattered, the shores sank underground, and now it's a subterranean lake. So that's fun, and it got poisoned because
Yeah.
crap.
Well, all of those arcane energies, all of the crap
Yep.
during the Titan War, it's all draining downhill into that lake.
Now there's all these nasty monsters and undead that are like, we're here. Oh no, the undead are in the deepening crypt, which is another sinkhole near one of the old cities, one of the old Ledean cities, and it used to be a walled city, and it all sunk down, and now there's a bunch of undead who are hiding from the sun, and like at noon, which is the only time the sunlight hits, they'll run inside the buildings.
Right. It's funny because I always say,
"Oh,
it sounds like a great vacation spot," but it really is if you're undead, because especially if you're a wraith or a vampire or whatever, you can be out almost all the time, except for that like hour or maybe 2 hours where it's like that shaft of light comes down and you're like,
yeah, and you run inside the ruinous buildings. And
right.
So
If you're undead, this is the place to be.
Well, if you're undead, half of fucking Ghelspad is the place to be, really.
I guess I should say, if you're sun-fearing undead, this is the place to be.
There's more. There's more places to be as a sun-fearing undead, to be fair. This is a place to be. There's a lot of undead places here. But this is one. There's like, if there's so many, oh god, it just hits me how much potential, like, ruinous. I mean, the whole conceit of the Scarred Lands is a billion places that PCs can go to explore ruins of monsters, and this is just yet another one. So here's another, like, go find the treasure in the lost city of Abringard. You'll have to fight undead hiding from the sunlight. Go in at noon, there you go. Whew, okay, moving on. So that was the plains of the Perforated Plains. As I said, Gaurak was killed there. Ripped all of his teeth. Fell over the place. A bunch of the teeth, like a vast bulk of the teeth, that weren't ripping holes in plains or leaving rocks on plains, fell right next to where the battle took place, where it's now called the Spires of Gaurak. And he's got the map on the thing, good. Bunch of the teeth fell right there, as Denna just sort of dropped them at her feet, I guess, before she started hucking them. And this brand new mountain range that's only 170 odd years old, they shattered upon impact, or maybe she broke them in her hand when she ripped them out, I don't know, but bits of teeth fell and made these mountains. And they what's cool for Derakeen is, even though a bunch of monsters moved in, they do act as a shield against the Perforated Plains and all of the yick that happens there, because figure, like, all the plant life, not all, but most of the plant life of the Perforated Plains is dead, so you get like winds and whatnot and everything, and these mountains shield them from at least weather, if not gauntlings. And since these mountains are effectively Titan Ichor, Gaurak essence, a bunch of creatures that lived in these mountains became Gaurak monsters, and those that didn't, lunch of Gaurak monsters moved in. So the gauntlings and the fatlings moved in this region to be like, we want to be near where his essence is, and moved in. And so you find all of these like basically Gaurak spawned monsters there, gluttonous trolls and carrion hounds, and of course the infamous Vengarak, which is one of my faves as a kind of high tier one monster. They're just fantastic, the Vengarak. Did I talk about them before? They have the
Yeah, they've
special
come up a
ability
few
to
times.
eke out divine worshippers and beat the shit out of them. And they're pretty horrible. So yeah, and also there's like goblinoids there and various other things. And in the middle of these little mountain range is a place called Vengarak Vale, which is where the Vengarak gather to breed. So that's fun. And when their numbers get too high, they just run out into Darakeen and start hunting. So a lot of those war colleges are like, let's put some defenses near those mountains to make sure that, you know, during the springtime Vengarak invasions, we can fight them back. And the Vengarak are horrible because they bury underground and then pop up, and that's really hard to catch and to spot. So think tremors. Yeah, I know I've talked about this before because I remember saying think tremors before. So that's the Vengarak Vale and the Gaurak's Spires of Gaurak. We talked about the Felled Forest already, so I'm just going to kind of move around the Perforated Plains. I feel like I'm going really fast today, which I guess is maybe good. Khet. As we're going south of the Perforated Plains, there's a tiny little forest in the smack dab in the middle of all of you've got the Hornsaw, you've got the Stricken, you've got the Felled Forest. There's this tiny little forest, really more of a grove, called the Khet Forest, Khet. It is way more dangerous than its itty bitty size would imply. As there in the middle of this forest is a druidic city that back in the day wasn't so bad. Blah blah blah, druids we live in trees and we're happy go lucky. And then Mormo died, and then bad happened. Because these druids who were Mormo's cool and blah blah blah, kind of went mad, and are now like, we must bring Mormo back and blah, and they're insane, and they believe wholeheartedly that as followers of Mormo and of those and they do some pretty graphic things to be blessed by her, they believe that what they imbibe, the spirits of it, go to Mormo's essence to feed her, to aid in her resurrection. Thus, they are known as the cannibals of verdant. The most evil druids across anywhere on Skarn, and some of the most evil people across anywhere on Skarn. They are the definition of neutral evil, and chaotic evil in many cases as well. And they're truly, you want the most, in my opinion, the most horrible villains in this region. And we've talked about the Hags of the Hornsaw. These guys are worse. I mean, these guys are, pick your favorite horror movie. These guys are that, whatever it is, whatever, they do it. If it's possible in a fantasy universe, they do it. I use your imagination here. So pretty horrible place. The woods themselves, full of lycanthropes and assassin vines and shambling mounds and charfiends and murder sprites and all of those other horrible abominations. But the city is just, well, let me talk about some of the weird factions. So they're as I said, their big thing is we eat people with souls, and believe that energy goes on to Mormo. And it's interesting because you think cannibals, you think Gaurak, because most cannibal cults on Scarlands are associated with Gaurak. Well, these are the exception. I did wonder if it's like again, someone fucked up in the writing, and they were like, they were supposed to be Mormites. Okay, let's give a reason why they're cannibals. Okay. Don't know. I don't know if that was the plan or not. But that's the thing. And there's a whole bunch of like, and it's factions the right word? I don't want to factions, but specific Kabbalic groups within the Cannibals of Khet. There's the Bloodletters. These guys show up in the Player's Guide to Druids and Clerics. They are covered in tattoos and body piercings, which isn't evil in itself by any means. Tattoos and body piercings are quite cool. But the way they make those tattoos, I'm going to get into Squick Country, so trigger warning for body grossness. Just warning you now. They, I don't even want to talk about this. They cut into their flesh and they drench the lesions with snake venom and then lace it closed with all sorts of metal studs and wood and stuff. And then it like seals closed, and if they survive, which they use a lot of magic to make that possible, it kind of creates these permanent marks on them and then comes up on their body as funky designs and stuff.
It's almost more like scarification than it is tattooing, but it has the same rule set as the magical tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys are rabid, like think multi-class druid barbarians, and I don't know if there's a thing on this, but they are known to just kill for shits and giggles. And most of the other Mormites in that area are kind of terrified of these guys, the Bloodletters, and just sort of stay out of their way, let them do their thing, and or aim them at something. But because these guys are known to not just kill what they're aimed at, they're known to kill just other Mormites, Mormo worshippers, who don't show enough loyalty to Mormo, but also just because they're bored. So don't let these guys get bored, and they'll be like, here, go kill some stuff. Something else I should point out as I get into this. The cannibals of Khet, their big thing is their utter hatred of Denев, because Denев killed Mormo, and the followers of Denев, primarily the elves of the Ganges and Veratray and that region. They have a super hate-on for anything related to that. So they have had multiple campaigns where they've gone into the Ganges and that area and tried to attack. The most famous of which was the Druid War. That happened in... When was the Druid War? My notes are scattered. AV... Anyway, there's this thing called the Druid War. It was well after the Divine War, 50-ish years ago. So AV 100-ish, I want to say, but don't catch me on that. If you can find that date, Jeremy. Thought I had that, but I don't have it easily in my notes. They did the Druid War, where the Mormon worshippers of Khet raised legions of Titanspawn. So it wasn't just a skirmish like a lot of their little battles. They raised a whole legion of Titanspawn and marched on Veratray. And this we'd mentioned the Druid War multiple times already. A lot of it, like way back in the Calastian episode, when Murdoch first took power, the Calastians had sent support because there was an alliance, sent support to help the elves, and Murdoch called the forces back so he could basically take over Calastia from his dad. I think his dad, we talked about it in that episode. So they abandoned them. And leaving the elves and allies with Vigils of Vesh, and eventually the Vigils of Vesh came and helped them, and eventually the barbarians of Lebedia came and helped them. But it was until after these cannibals had ripped their way across the Ganges, laying siege to Veratray, and made it all the way to Amalthea, which is a city-state, that was right at the edge of between the Ganges and the Kaldor Mountains, north of Tanazu. Amalthea, this little mountain here. Very sacred city to Deneb. Basically human Deneb worshippers. And they're like, hey, we hate all things Deneb. We want to take these guys out. And so they attacked Amalthea. And Amalthea was like Alexandria, center of learning and art and just beautiful artwork and statuary and paintings. And, just think like Renaissance kind of stuff. Gorgeous, all this wonderful lore and artwork. There's a big library there. And the druids burned it to the ground and ruined the city. And now the city now stands in ruins. We'll talk a little bit more about Amalthea later, but in a future episode. But completely ruined the city. And those few people managed to survive and went to the hills, but the Amalthean population is truly decimated to what it was, and decimated in reverse. So 10% left, annihilated almost. Until eventually the Albadians and the Vigilants showed up and drove off the cannibals. But famous historical event. So these cannibals are horrible, but they're one of their main intentions. I'm going to go into one of the other factions. This group called the Ketinas Phagists, Phagist. Phagists. Once called the renewers of the cannibals of Khet were once called the renewers of the cycle. And these guys were really the group that started the whole devour people to give Mormo essence. These were the group behind it, and they are the highest order amongst the cannibal druids. One of their intentions of the Druid War wasn't just to kill a bunch of Deneb followers, but also to find Deneb. Rumors are after the war, she went to sleep. She basically went underground and took a nappy bobos with the idea of her sleep would send her magical energy into the earth as the titan of the earth and heal things from the war. And she's been able to heal the Ganges in some areas slowly. So they believe based on where the center of his healing was, and rightly so, that she is buried or sleeping. I say buried, but sleeping somewhere under the Ganges. So they want to find where she's asleep, where she is. And that's a lot of their reasons why they keep invading the Ganges, is to find Mormo's resting place. The idea is to turn it into a serpent hole. We talked about the serpent holes when we talked about the Hornsaw Forest, these places sacred to Mormo. And they have developed a ritual through craziness, where through like ritual components and venom, snake venom, and using bits of Mormo and whatnot, that they could create a serpent hold. They can complete this ritual where Deneb is asleep. They can turn her sacred area into a serpent hold, and giving Mormo the ability, Mormo's spirit effectively, or this is what they believe would happen, giving Mormo's spirit the ability to basically enter Deneb and take over her body and be reborn using Deneb. This is the plot of the Serpent Amphora. Like, I'm not kidding. The plot, the whole thing around the Serpent Amphora is they've got the Serpent Amphora contains this big clump of Mormo, and it's battle between who gets that amphora. As the PCs are trying to, the Vigils of Vesh are trying to keep that urn away from the Mormites. You've got two factions of Mormites warring over this thing. You've got the Darl and Not, who just want it for power, but they do want Mormo back. And you've got the Cannibals of Khet, who want to take it to Deneb's resting place and bring her back. And if you fuck up the adventure, they do. But if you don't fuck up the adventure, you get this climactic battle in that very spot of where Mormo's resting, and you basically interrupt the ritual as they make a serpent hole. Amongst these they have a leader amongst them who's this wonderfully horrible Medusa. And she shows up in, of all places, Jeremy stumbled across this, and I was like, oh, cool, I forgot about that. She showed up in Divine and the Defeated. If you've got a picture of her, Charlas, Queen of Khet and High Priestess of Mormo. She's a descendant of one of the Medusas who fought for Mormo during the Divine War, and this is like her nefarious plan, is to find that. And her minions show up as a big threat toward the end of the Serpent Amphora's module. As your final fight in that is with a bunch of Medusa. I ran that module so many moons ago, so don't remember every single detail. And then Jeremy wanted to talk about one of the other wonderful, one of my favorite NPCs from the cannibals, Ilkatstra, who shows up as this mysterious figure throughout the Serpent Amphora, who's never named in the module, and yet he keeps being mentioned and told to the GM. The GM is given all this information about him, and the PCs keep running into his forces, but he's never name dropped ever, and you never encounter him directly, so it's really weirdly random.
Yeah. A lot of the way that, like, as a DM you encounter him is in this, like, novelization. Like, it's not you can't go, like, buy a novel and he's in it, but there's, like, the stories that are in the Serpent Amphora that are him, and the way he's controlling things in the background and pushing the group where he wants them to go. But you're right, he never actually shows up.
I have loose intentions of maybe including him in if we ever finish this flippin' series, because I did use him in my campaign, of maybe have him making an appearance in some of the later books of Through Shadows and Dreams. Maybe. Big long maybe. I've done the research in any case. I actually spoke to multiple times to Ari Marmel, who created this wonderful NPC. He's known as the Autumn King. And I actually have what he has said about Ilkatstra back when he wrote the module, as he right before the third book, or well, fourth book technically, because there was the Serpent Saga is technically 4 books. There was this little free introductory module, which is available on Drive-Thru RPG converted to 5th edition, which I had a small hand in. Serpent Amphora. It's just called the Serpent Amphora, and then books 1, 2, 3 are the Serpent and the Fold, Serpent and the Scepter, and the Serpent Citadel. So Ari wrote this between working on books 2 and 3, or as book 3 is about to come out. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he describes the Autumn King, and I absolutely adore this, and claims there's artwork of him, but Jeremy and I searched everything and couldn't find it.
No, in fact, the artwork that is up is snagged from the internet on DM Dave's website, of a blight druid. It's the closest thing that I could find that makes it look like maybe this guy might look like. So just keep that in mind.
But description. The Autumn King sat upon his throne of briars as he shifted the thorns. As he shifted, the thorns would scrape lightly, somehow soft yet shrill at once, against his bones. Against the wall behind him leaned a tall staff, carved of finest wood, capped with teeth and bone and garishly bright feathers. Draped over it was the baldric of thick feathers made from the flesh of no animal known to any man present, from which hung, in turn, an ancient leaf-bladed sword of polished bronze. Let's see, the Autumn King... The Autumn King has chosen not to unnerve his guests too much that day, so he had donned thick brown trousers beneath his robe, but he felt less Had he felt less magnanimous, he might instead have worn his favored leather loincloth, leaving far more of his skeletal, vine-embraced body for all to see. Had any of his visitors drawn near enough, they might have noted that the thorns on the Autumn King's vines protruded here and there through his clothes. Too, they might have seen the knotwork patterns on his skull actually continued to the smaller fissures across the bones of his shoulders, his sternum, and his ribs, his arms, but none had ever the courage or the constitution to stand that close. In a nutshell, Ilkastra looks like a lich. He looks like a skeleton. But his bones are covered in this, like, almost engraved vine work. And his body is encased in these thorny vines. So if anything, the art would be the art of the vine undead, which I think, because he creates these constructs, technically not undead, of these skeletons, but it's a construct slash plant life where he takes these vines that he's infused with, like, not necessarily sentient, but certainly consciousness. They interweave through skeletons and turn them into walking skeletons, but they're being controlled by these magical vines. Now, Kutster is a druid, through and through, but he's not undead. At least this isn't supposed to be undead. He's supposed to be some kind of wacky fae, maybe? It's not clear, and it's left intentionally vague whether he's undead or a fae, but or some kind of cross between the two of them. But he's like a lich, but he's also like a plant, or he controls plants. So he's neat, in my opinion. I think he's a really compelling villain. And his motives throughout the Serpent Amphora are hazy, because if the PC succeed and they prevent Mormo's resurrection, which, any good GM will, you're not allowed to bring back Tiamat, you're not allowed to bring back Mormo, it would probably not let happen, and help the PCs would succeed. You'd think he'd be pissed. I want Mormo back. But he's not pissed, which is the interesting ending to the Serpent Saga. He's fascinated. He's like, no, we haven't failed. We've learned something. We now know where Mormo sleeps. We've confirmed. We don't have the exact route, because this whole thing where how they find it is hard. So that, like, they just can just go back there. It's complicated. There's magic and shit. But he's like, we've confirmed she's asleep under the Ganges. That was in question. Now we know for sure. So he's like all happy. So that's interesting. And to me, is his goal to resurrect Mormo? Or is his goal, like so many, to gain power from Mormo, and not with the intention of bringing her back, but with the intention of his own power and potentially apotheosis or something to bolster himself to more power? But he's interesting, and frequently at odds with the Blood Crone and various groups. And he's part of the cannibals of Khet, but he's not a cannibal himself, because I don't think he needs to eat. But he certainly works with him, and he's got several minions mentioned throughout, including people who just look normal, not like raving cannibals and whatnot. So I love him. I want to do more with him, and I think he's just a fun character. So there is that. Let's see, who else do I got here in terms of? We were talking about the phagists. There's a couple other cults within the cannibals. There's the Witches of Venom. Actually, the Witches of Venom are part of the Darl Anat, but there's a sister organization amongst the cannibals called the Ophidian Sisterhood. Basically the same intent. They're these funky rangers who are just, crazy cannibals. There's the Snake Charmers of Mormo, a respected organization in Khet, so much as any of these guys are respected. And they are basically sorcerer druids who, as the cannibals, have spies and even ambassadors to various places across Ghelspad. They'd be members of the Snake Charmers, spying on things and being like doing negotiations with other villainous creatures. So, and then in Relics and Rituals, a spell showed up associated with the cannibals called the Wall of Hornets, because that's fun. Part of the initiation, if you're going to join this crazy organization, is they'll the druids will cast Wall of Hornets and make initiates calmly walk through it. Not run, not panic, calmly walk through it, because they're being stung to death by hornets. And if you survive and get to the other side of the wall, they're like, "Good job, initiated will heal you and give you noms and bedtime. If you fail, they just kill you." So, worth being stung by a mum. You're joining a cannibal cult, guys. So, what do you expect? So, that's a thing. And so there's a cool spell called Wall of Horns. I don't think it's been converted to 5e yet. Potentially something someone can do in the Slaracian Vault. Okay. Have I missed anything for the wonderful Kerdetians? I'm sure I have. He's shaking his head. Nah, good enough. Okay, so we talked about the Perforated Plains. We talked about the Spires of Gaurak briefly. Talked about Kerdet. Finally, my final place, final two places for today are two more forests. So first, because as we continue our tour around the Perforated Plains, we now arrive in the Stricken Forest. This one's fun, but they're all fun, frankly. I don't know why I always say this one's fun because they're all fun. Stricken Forest. This one's a little bit more interesting. It's a big forest, known for a couple of things. On a mundane level, it's known for the Fraternal Order of the Waltonians. This is obscure lore for Scarred-Lands, by the way, folks. These are hunters who use the Stricken Forest as a proving ground, and will just send their hunters in there to go kill something. Like, "Oh, get us an owl bear, boys!" And they have some small cabins in the Haggard Hills, and they just send in little hunting forays into the Stricken Forest. On the whole, the Stricken Forest isn't too bad as places go in the Scarred Lands. Not, in terms of good forest, you've really just got the Ganges, and that's like the only good forest that's major. Stricken Forest is less bad than all the other horrible forests. But what it is famously known for is the Obsidian Pyre. In the middle of the forest, nobody goes in the middle of the forest. Edges, yeah, you can do some hunting or whatever. You can pass through safe-ish. There's still, a bunch of monsters and whatnot, but it's not horrible. But the edge of the middle of the forest is this place called the Obsidian Pyre. It's this weird, magically blighted area, and I don't know if you got the pyre art or not. And it's this bunch of black standing stones that are always burning. They're really neat. And they were first discovered in 80 AV. So they're not too old. These aren't a result of the Divine War. These aren't pre-war weird-ass artifacts. These are a recent thing. They're about 12 feet high and 30 feet across. These just big stones that look like they're on fire. They do not set the woods on fire. You can approach them without being immolated. You don't want to really touch them necessarily, but you can approach them. And there's this group of archmages, very powerful wizards, associated with it called the Obsidian Pyre, their organization. A diabolists was the word thrown at these guys. The lore in this was interesting because it was like eking lore. Who are these guys? There's all mystery behind this. Some say they're some say some of them are reptilian, so maybe a Sathi amongst them. There's certainly a Sathi in the artwork. Some say it's maybe a piece of the Mesos that they've uncovered and that they're doing something with it. Some say it's one of Gaurak's teeth or bits of Gaurak's teeth. Lots of implications that there's a portal there to somewhere, like maybe to the abyss or to the nine hells or some other place or whatever they called Jordan's hell. Um, Others say that maybe it's being used to raise a defeated titan. And Lucian Dane, the famous necromancer in Glividotel, was a member of the Obsidian Empire. But in truth, and boy, it took some digging to find the in truth. Well, not really digging. It's revealed in the Player's Guide to Bard, Sorcerers, and Wizards. It's about Belsameth. It's all our favorite plot and weird ass lore is about Belsameth. And they have these wizards have this plan. They came from the Ledean Empire. They were members of the Summoner organization, and descendants of them. These guys came from Aramar. There's a reason this is part of this episode. And first came from the Summoners of Aramar, and these summoners were investigating these concepts of these rituals. The idea of going through an apotheosis and becoming a daemon lord, basically a demon, a greater outsider fiend thing, not like a half fiend, but just a demon lord. But it's specifically a daemon lord. Scarred in most other D&D settings, you have devils and demons. You have, the whole blood war, and chaotic evil are the demons, and lawful evil are the devils. Scarredlands introduced this third fiendish branch, who are the neutral evil guys, called the daemons, because we needed to do the AE reversal thing and come up with a new word that was still meaning the same as the other two words. So the neutral evil fiends are called daemons. And they belong in Belsameth's nightmare realm, her afterlife, her hell / abyss thing is where the daemons come from. And these Kabbalists, these summoning wizards' intent is to do this ritual of apotheosis and basically turn into a daemon, but not just any daemon, but a daemon who's like super powerful. And what they've discovered with this ritual is the more badass they are as a wizard, i.e. the higher level they are, the more badass they will be as a daemon. So if you're a 15th level wizard, you're going to be a really badass, minor daemon prince. If you're a 20th level wizard, you're going to be a daemon major prince duke thing. And that's their goal. And 3 of them have already done it. So there's theoretically 3 fiend princes running around who used to be wizards on Skarn, who are now living in Belsameth's land and being all muhuaha. So yeah, and that's their whole thing. And to join this organization, basically they don't like enlist people. They don't like look for people. They don't what do you call it? Convert people, whatever. But if people find them, they're like, oh, okay, prove yourself, and we might let you in. Share our secrets. You share some secrets for us, some things you've discovered about this stuff, and we will share with you. And then periodically they'll choose the next person to undergo the ritual. And usually it's just whoever's the highest level, because you want to be the most badass. And that person, goes the ritual. And it's as any true ritual in Skarn, it's really expensive. It involves a lot of secondary casters and spell components and whatnot. And you have to undergo all of this thing. We just did one in the family affair. We did a very minor true ritual. This is not a minor true ritual. This is one of the biggers. And they use this pyre as a focus of energy, and it's not clear if they found it and then modified it or if they made it. But the pyre acts as a portal. And they always the wizards don't live in the Stricken Forest, but they're found there. They live somewhere else. It's clear they live somewhere else. Are they just spread across all of Ghelspad? What's going on? And some of them are spread across Ghelspad, mostly running around looking for lore and spell components to do this ritual. But the bulk of them live in the ethereal plane, and this funky rock pile serves as a gateway for them to go to their ethereal plane magic wizard mansion or whatever the hell they live in. And in fact, one of the original patrons, so two of the original guys, there was this guy named Sagnatha who was from Arimar. He was the guy who discovered the ritual. And when Arimar was falling, when the three gods showed up and made a sinkhole, before they showed up, he sent his followers out of the city, like, get out. They're on their way. Got warned by Belsmith, they're coming. Get the hell out. I'll hold them off. You know, because if I leave, people are gonna get sus and be all like, "Whoa, what's going on?" You guys get out of the city. So his followers left. The rumor is he then underwent the ritual himself. I don't know how he could have done it, but they think he did the apotheosis somehow. But his guys escaped, and then they established the Obsidian Empire. The first one of the Pyre to transform was Ida Blue or Lida Blue. He's now a jackal-headed demon sorcerer, or daemon sorcerer, sorry. And he hangs out in their ethereal citadel with the other Obsidian Empire wizards going, good job, guys. Who's going to be next? You know, he doesn't precisely lead them, but he certainly, advises them and whatnot. They don't really have a leader per se. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. The actual player guide has a cool table, a summoning table, so that if you are playing a summoner wizard who's evil, here's your things you can summon at various of the summon creature chart. Back in the 3X days, you could do summon creature 1 through 9. They have this, like, these are the fiends you get. So that's kind of cool. A couple of magic items for these guys showed up in relics and rituals, including a bag of the Pyre, which is a little pouch that, okay, trigger warning, gross. The pouch is full of ashes, made from the body of a victim of murder or treachery, and the milk from a woman whose baby died as an infant. So sad. So these guys are evil. Have we mentioned that? And there's this little pouch, and if you throw a handful of an ash in the pouch, it creates a little concealment zone around them, and basically creates this 10-foot wide, 10-foot radius cloud around them. It provides concealment so they can use it to, like, cast spells or hide in or whatever, escape from. And people who try to walk through it have to overcome a fear effect. So, and it's cheap little, like, poof, I escape. I have to get through my fear cloud before you can find me. So that's kind of a fun little horrible magic item. And then there's a thing called the Robe of the Netherworld, which is basically like their equivalent of Robes of the Magi. It's certainly that badass. It gives you, and back in the 3-5 days, gives you a +5 deflection bonus to AC, and spell slots, and control undead. So definitely up there with those big, various magical wizard robes in the 3-5 days. Only this one, these are marked with the symbol of the Obsidian Empire. So the only way to get one is to fight and kill a wizard of the Obsidian Empire. The plus side, though, is if you're caught wearing one and you're not a member of the Obsidian Empire, they might send you an invitation because you've proved your badassness by killing a member of the Obsidian Empire. Which I think is kind of fun. They're like, oh, you managed to kill one of us? Want to come to a meeting? Like, not vengeance. No. It's like, are you interested in apotheosis and becoming a greater fiend? Here's our card. Meet in the Stricken Forest, and we'll see you on Thursday. There is that. That's fun. I love these guys because they're totally evil, but they're not like the cannibals level of evil. They're just more like, we're just wizards trying to become immortal by making deals with the goddess of death, moon thing, So, yeah. So I think they're just a fun secret society because, like I said, you can run into them anywhere in Ghelspad because they could be like, we're looking for spell components, and so they're a great, like, little throwaway villain thing. And I bet a bunch of them was like, I've just given up on this whole apotheosis thing. I'm gonna do something else instead. But I was part of the order for a while. Here's my robe, and found Madriel. Decided to stop following Belsmith. So, and they're not necessarily clerics of Belsmith or anything like that. They're not. They're amongst her like people she's fucking around with, but they're not necessarily followers of her per se. But she's like, more demons for me is more demons for me, because in the end, you're beholden to her. And a lot of people back in the Days of Armor, when they're first doing this research, a lot of people were like, yeah, apotheosis sounds great, but it means you're beholden to a god, and we don't like the sound of that. So we don't want to do it that way. We'll try lichdom instead, you know. So there are many ways to become immortal on Skarn. Right. Anything I missed about the Obsidian Pyre?
I do have to wonder how many liches are just like, maybe I should have gone the demon route, because, now I've got to carry around this phylactery. If somebody breaks it, I'm screwed. I don't have a replacement plan. I can't, get that insurance on it. I'm
and I miss
dead.
having skin and being able to taste.
Right? I miss peeing. I never thought I would miss peeing, but I do. Yeah. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I could have been a Daemon Lord, but no,
Right.
I decided to become a Lich. Yeah, so all that business. That's what Drek's character should have done in that. Yeah. Okay. Final location for today: the Scrub Forest or the Scrub Woods. It's called both. I've seen references to both names. This is our continuing around. Second smallest forest, right outside of Leone. Folks of Leone generally don't go in there unless they're trying for a really badass hunt. As this is a haunted woods, but not in the way that the Glividato forest is haunted by ghosts. This is haunted by corporeal undead mostly. It once was a sacred grove of Denev, but now it has been claimed, like so many places on Skarn, by undead. Because there aren't enough places on Skarn that are claimed by undead, we'll have one more. And there was this thing called the Dead Tide of Agavir. I admit I didn't do enough research in what the heck the Dead Tide of Agavir was. I probably need to do more. But basically it was an army of undead that the Madriel's followers were, as goddess of the sun, and they were, enhanced turning abilities, were basically going down and trying to take out. And drove them, ended up just through, I think this was a battle in the war, drove them into this wood during the Titans War. The undead managed to dig in once they got into the forest and actually made trenches. So extremely organized undead. So obviously led by something intelligent, not just a bunch of zombies and skeletons, but consisting mostly of a bunch of zombies and skeletons. They entrenched in. And then the Madrielites got called away on other business, like, we need you at this other battle place, please. Mormo's about to fall, and a bunch of people that need healing. They ran off. So that which left this group of undead more time to drench in further. And by AV5, they had this place. It was theirs. And they've basically built this effectively fortress throughout the majority of this little forest. They've built this trench that circles the entire part of the wood. And you can get like a little way, a mile or so into the forest, and then you run into a trench and sentry towers, equally scattered about the whole wood. And it's nuts. And it's at the widest part. It's 150 miles wide. This crazy entrenchment. And beyond the trench, it goes underground because undead, prefer no sunlight. But good luck getting across it, as they have tons of exit points throughout the region. And if you get too close to the trench, first they have these guard towers, and they're constantly pegging you with arrows. These, basically zombies up there going, and they don't sleep. They're just like, you get up there, shot by arrows by zombies, and then you get too close, and a horde of undead comes streaming out of this trench to attack. So, very World War II forest army thing, World War One, I guess World War One, vibe, French warfare. The trench has a name, the Tralverit Trench, named after the vigilant who discovered it back in the day. 6 feet deep, posts of packed dirt covered by dead tree branches and grass, so they're kind of camouflaged, but gives the sentries a clear view of anybody approaching. There's a death general who seems to lead this army. Maybe a undead corpse whisperer. It's really not clear how he does it, but certainly anybody who's attacked finds themselves joining the army as they get enlisted when they fail. So he can bring more people. The area also is known for 2 liches who have many wars between them in the southern and northern copses. The southern copse is controlled by the lich Axon Malik. Great name, by the way. Axon Malik, I love that name. Who came from who's part of the whole Agavir Dead Tide. He's built a multi-tiered underground home and caves under the woods. So that's a dungeon. And he watches the land with crystal balls and wizard eyes. So anybody coming and approaching his region, he knows. But he's constantly at doing million war skirmishes with the other lich in the northern coast, named Malik Hentir. So Mach Hentir, who's a necromancer. They're probably both necromancers in my opinion, but anyway. And he lives in a pit lined with cages where he's captured anybody who's bothered to make their way through the scrub forest and does necromancy experiments on them. Moo-hoo, ha ha ha. Basically, these 2 guys are this kind of mini minion war constantly living on both ends.
I mean, when you have
trench.
eternity, why not? Like, what else are you gonna do with your spare time?
These are the guys who I think, well, like, maybe we should have joined the Obsidian
Right.
Empire, you know, instead,
Yeah.
instead of becoming liches. So, yeah. So this is a cool thing. It's like, so how many dungeons is this in just this one forest? 2 liches and a whole, fortress of 150 miles of trench and underground tunnels full of undead and some general things. So you've got at least 3 high-level undead badasses. But the one thing is, these are corporeal. You're not going to run into ghosts and stuff. It's just, skeletons and zombies for the foot soldiers, and then I'm guessing you're going to find ghouls and wights and vampires and your favorite corporeal undead, and clearly a couple of liches. In the center of the forest, however, if you manage to get through all of this bullshit past the trench, in the center there's this thing called the image, which is 8 or 9 statues, I should say. 8 of them are standing but had their faces knocked off, and the 9th one is just a crumbled mess on the ground. They know the statues, or so whichever vigilant or whoever made his way in. I'm guessing it was just a misfired teleportation spell. Whoever found them discover the statues. They know they're older than the war, so they know they predate the dead tide that came in here. A little else is known. Theories are that there's 8 statues, so maybe they stand for the 8 victor gods, and that the undead knock their faces off because they hate them so much. But there's 9, not 8. So who is the 9th one? Is that Madriel? They're thinking because they really hate Madriel, so maybe they ripped her statue down and crumpled it up. I'm going with Arcanthus. Maybe it was the 9 gods, including Arcanthus, and they either ripped Arcanthus down or they ripped Madriel down. So that's my guess. No one's gone in there and counted the arms, so it's not clear if one of the statues had 4 arms or not. But there was originally 9 major gods, not 8, so there's that potential answer. But in any case, these the dead tide do avoid the area, but also fight anybody who tries to get in it through them. But they just fight anybody who tries to get in the area in general. So, like I said, you can get a little bit in the forest, but once you get into arrow range of that trench, you probably want to turn around, go back to Leone or wherever you were. So yeah, that's my tour of the Perforated Plains today.
And I'll
Did I
throw out
miss
there one more
anything?
time. Great vacation spot.
Yeah, if you're well, like, lots of potential for dungeons and adventures.
Oh yeah.
I would avoid non unless you're very high level or have some really amazing magic, and I would avoid Khet just period, no matter who you are. Um, but the Scrub Forest and the uh Stricken Forest, interesting potential certainly on the borders.
Yeah.
And if you're pretty badass and you want to go fight a lich or a bunch of crazy wizards, potential there. And as well as the Spires of Gaurak, lots of cool stuff. And Gaurak aren't that really, they're like CR5. They're not that hard to kill. I have thrown them at level 2 parties, and they're not that hard to kill. They're like the only monster kind of thing, but yeah. And then the Perforated Plains, which is full of potential. It's a ruins.
Absolutely.
But that sinkhole sounds. All those sinkholes sound kind of. Yeah, I mean, I almost want to do a tally now. Like, I've joked. It's like, oh, there's back when I ran my campaign, I was like, I didn't have that much undead. They didn't really run into undead that much, but I was very focused on specific areas, and I didn't really go to some of these places very often because we were more in northeast Ghelspad for the most part, and then I ramped all over the rest of the planet. There's a lot of locations with undead. If you actually tallied them, holy crap!
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot, and that whole just central corridor across Garn, just a lot of,
Yeah.
from the Mounds of Man to the Perforated Plains, there's just a lot of undead. So if you're a big fan of that kind of gothic horror,
Yeah. Good spot for it.
good spot for it.
Well, Sarah, why don't you tell us all about yourself as we head out for the week?
I am Sarah Stewart. I'm a Scarred Lands nerd. Dive into this crap. Wrote a novel. Attempting to write more when I have time again. But in the meantime, I've written a whole bunch of stuff for the Story Racing Vault. Go find it there, including the Frostlands of Fenric. Bunch of adventures on the Blood Sea, which we will get to eventually. And what else? The Calendar of the Scarred Lands, and Serpent Amphora, Quick Start, and a new book coming probably late February for Fenric, and Yenny's Journal for Frostlands of Fenric.
Nice.
So check them out, and my website is morelikethisindustries.com, which I remember to mention every once in a while.
Yay!
Who the heck are you?
I'm Jeremy Hochhalter, and I did write part of this, so I'm going to share it again. Yugman's Guide Collected. It is of 133 pages PDF. They're currently doing the last run of hey, does anyone see anything that we missed during editing before they open it for print on demand, which is awesome. It's full of
I already found some issues.
Yeah, make sure you submit them. A bunch of new societies, backgrounds. There are new subclasses for every class. There are new races. There's expansions on some of the races, like that. There's now the Broadreach dwarves are available. It reintroduces half elves and half orcs, which is great. It has a revisited version of the Hollow Legionnaire, and it introduces the Minotaur, the Scrag, and the Tritons as new playable races. Bunch of new spells, magic items. It also talks about heritages. If you don't want to do your the races like 5e tends to, as D&D has for a long time, where you're getting a bonus because of being an orc or whatever, it introduces these new heritages that allows you to build your character differently. I thought it was pretty cool. So go check that out. I shared the link. I'll put it in the show notes on YouTube. You can find me on Twitch on Monday, Wednesday, Friday currently. On Mondays, I'm here on Travis Legg's channel, which is Plastic Age Plays, for a family affair. Sarah's on there, as is her wife's Fran. On Wednesdays, I play in Chaz Calendar's game Academia Chronicles of Porta Temporia, a Final Fantasy XIV inspired 5e campaign. And then on Fridays, obviously here with Sarah, talking Scarred Lands. What else? Find me on Twitter. Not currently running, so.
Oh, yeah. Not currently running. Okay.
Yeah.
And I had a question for you. Which part of Yugman's Guide did you write? Or do you remember?
A multitude of parts. Yeah. So I have a smattering across pretty much everything, except for the heritages. I didn't get to do any of that. I think that's all Travis. Neat.
Yeah. I think it comes from the new release in Tasha's, because you can be like how you get most races, you get a +2 to one stat and a +1 to another.
Right.
So if you were like a dwarf who grew up with orcs, you'd have a dwarven +2 to con or whatever it is, and then your orc, because you grew up with orcs, you get the +1 to strength because you did a lot of weightlifting as a kid.
Right.
But instead of knowing axes and hammers like a dwarf, you know axes like a orc. Okay,
like an orc, right?
A bad choice.
Yeah, but it's more about how you were raised or where you grew up, as opposed to I genetically know this. And like that's not really obviously, like elves know how to use a longbow because they're raised knowing that. But what if you weren't raised by elves? Even if you're an elf, what if you're raised by dwarves? You're gonna know that axe better than you know that longbow.
Better than longbow.
Yeah,
exactly.
So
and that's the
idea
is that your pickup skills, your weapon and armor training, your languages, your tool proficiencies, and that +1 stat all come from your heritage, where your dark vision and your weird, I know this cantrip, or maybe not the cantrip might come from heritage too, but I have a +2 stat and I can, I don't know, fly or something. That'll come from your species. So I think that's neat.
Yeah.
I think it's really neat. And yeah, I'm gonna play with this.
Also, the cover art is super cool. I can't wait till this book comes out and I can have it on my bookshelf.
Oh,
but for now, you can go get the PDF, and you get like a discount. I think you get the price of the PDF off of your hardcover when you buy it.
Oh yeah, and if you bought at least 4 chapters of the Yugman's Guide, part 1 through 6,
right,
you get it for free.
Yeah, it should already be in your library.
Yeah, if
it's not, drop them a mail.
If you should have gotten an email from drive-thru,
right?
If you bought at least 4 of the chapters. If you didn't check your junk mail,
right?
Drive-thru, or if you unsubscribe to drive-thru or something like that, go log in drive-thru and see if you've got it, because I picked it up like right away, and I am loving the book because I read all through all 6, and I was like, here's your free copy. I was like, sweet. And the art there's so much more art in those 6, because you say, oh, I picked up all 6 volumes, why should I bother picking this up? Well, A, it's nice to have it all in one place, but more B, there's a ton more stuff that wasn't in those 6 volumes.
Yeah, it's the complete, but that doesn't mean that it's just that other stuff. It's
it's all consolidated. All the spells are in one doc.
Yeah, yay.
As someone who's been going through 6, it's nice to have everything in one place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm.
So yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at WHPubs, on Facebook at WH Publications, and make sure you subscribe or follow along here on Twitch, and we will see you next time. Thanks everybody for joining us. Take care. Bye.